Alright, boys and girls, so for your first reading lesson today, it's going to be the second half of Tom's Secret. So we're going to be continuing to find key events, and we're going to annotate them. We're also going to use these key events to summarize once again the text. You're going to share your understanding with your classmates, and you also are going to write to show me that you understand the key events. Alright, so let's go review what we did yesterday. So when we flip the pages over. Alright, so it started, remember, with Huck and Tom are the two main characters in this one. And remember, they come across a thief that is disguised as a Spaniard and an accomplice. So that's somebody else that is with him. And they are actually watching the two men dig up a treasure of gold. Alright, so they see him, but then they get concerned. Okay, they hear him say the number 2. And then Tom gets a little concerned because Tom testified to the Indian, which is an Indian. Okay, testified to him a while ago, Injun Joe, in a murder trial. So they're overhearing what the two men are saying, and the men said revenge, and then that's kind of scared Tom and Huck. Okay. All right. So then you have it continuing where they start to actually follow them. And Tom has a dream. So before they started following him, Tom has a dream and thinks it's kind of not really real. So he goes to Huck the next day, and then Huck does tell him, actually that did happen. So, and then they're trying to figure out what are they going to do next. And this is where they decide, hey, let's go track them down. Let's go find them. Alright, and then at the end, they decided that to try to figure out what the number 2 meant. And they came to a consensus of that it can't be a house number because the homes there don't really have house numbers. But they also thought about the taverns. So then they start going and checking out the taverns, and that's where we're going to pick up. Okay? So we did talk about one key event in 27 yesterday that Tom was off. But this is where we're going to pick up. So you can go ahead and highlight if you'd like number 27. This is when Tom goes and he says he's gone about half an hour, and he found that the best tavern, number 2, was occupied by a young lawyer. All right, so go ahead and highlight that if we didn't highlight yesterday. Go ahead and highlight that today. All right, and then 28. So the reason why that's a key event is because it takes one of the taverns away. It eliminates one of our possibilities. And if we were to leave that out, the story wouldn't be the same. Okay. Now in paragraph 28, you have where he starts to go to the next tavern. So number 2 of the other tavern was a little bit more of a mystery. So the tavern's keeper's young son said it was kept locked all the time, and he never saw anybody go into it or come out of it except at night. He did not know any particular reason for the state of things, had some little curiosity, but was rather feeble. He made the most of the mystery by entertaining himself with the idea that the room was haunted. Had noticed that there was a light in there the night before. Alright, boys and girls, so make sure you go and underline the number 2. So the next tavern, we're going to highlight that because it tells us that it's really suspicious and it's a little bit of a mystery. So, and that actually tells us what's going to happen next in the story. So that keeps it moving along. So go ahead and make sure you have that underlined for number 2. Alright, and we're going to go ahead and go over to the next one. Alright, so I'm going to read this. I'm going to zoom in. There you go. So 29 says, That's what I found out, Huck. I reckon that's the very number 2 we're after. I reckon it is, Tom. Now, what you gonna do? Let me think. Tom thought a long time. Then he said, I'll tell you. The back door of that number 2 is the door that comes out into that little closed alley between the tavern and the old rattle trap of a brick store. Now, you get hold of all the door keys you can find, and I'll nip all of Auntie's, and the first dark night, we'll go there and try 'em. And mind you, keep a lookout, because he said he was going to drop into town and spy around once more for a chance to get his revenge. If you see him, you must follow him, and if you don't go to that number 2, that ain't the place. And if he don't go to that number 2, so he's talking about Injun Joe, talking about the 2 people that he saw digging up the gold. Okay, tell Huck keep an eye out on him. Make sure if you do see him, see if he goes to that number 2. Okay? Alright, so there's really nothing going on in 29 through 31. But we do have something going on in 32 and 33. Alright, so what do they decide to do? What is their next step after they figure out that they want to go check out the tavern? What decision do they end up having to make? Right. They end up gathering all the keys. Okay, so they make a plan to go find all the keys. And Tom tells Huck, if you see him, just follow him. So that's Tom talking. Alright, and then Huck says, Lordy, I don't want to follow him by myself. So Huck's like, I don't want to do that by myself. Why, it'll be night, sure. He might not ever see you. And if he did, maybe he'll never think a thing. Well, if it's pretty dark, I reckon I'll track him. I don't know. I'll try. I'll bet I'll follow him. If it's dark, Huck, why, he might have found out he couldn't get his revenge and be going right after that money. If so, Tom, I'll follow him. I will, by jingoes. Now you're talking. Don't ever weaken, Huck. And I won't. Okay, so Huck agrees to follow him. To follow if he sees Injun Joe. So this would be your number 3. This would be your number 4. And this would be your number, number 5. Okay? So we only had 5 events for the last part of the story. Okay, boys and girls, so what you're going to do is you're going to take everything that you've highlighted. So from the beginning of the excerpt all the way to the end. Okay? And you are going to write an overall summary of the whole story. Because this is the end. We actually don't know, unless you go and read the Tom Sawyer adventure, it stops here. It kind of leaves you cliffhanging. Okay, sorry about that, but that's just, they only let us go this far. So if you turn the page, there is nothing left. So this is where it leaves off. So I'm going to ask you to write an overall summary of the whole entire excerpt. Okay, should be about 3 lines. Minimal. If you want to do 5 lines, there's not a problem with that, but it should take you at least 3 lines. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to put this into Google Classroom because it might be easier for you to type it all up. So what you're going to do is you're going to type up your summary and put it into Google Classroom. Alright, so remember your summary needs to be for the whole entire excerpt. So just reread your key events from beginning of the excerpt to the end, and think of an overall summary in your own words, maybe 3 to 5 sentences long. Okay, we want to keep our summary short. So just what happened? What's it basically about? The main points. All right, boys and girls, so that's it for this lesson, and we'll be back for the next lesson.